Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is Brave New History. I'm here with Philip
Are
Dorian.
did you
Yeah,
say something about a Myth Vision page?
oh, yeah, I put it on the Myth Vision Facebook page.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
and we're live,
All
by
right,
the
that's
way.
I was just wondering. Okay, no, that's all
Yep.
right.
Yep. And yeah, so we're here with Philip Dorian. Thank you for joining us. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
I've been wanting to talk with Phil for a while. You know, always posting some interesting stuff on the Facebook page for Myth Vision, and a lot of parallels. And we're talking about Zeus. We have Jesus, Peter, and what was the third? I know it's in the title.
Jesus, Peter, and Judas are
Judas.
are the three Zeuses.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And the way they do this is with the names. Zeus is Dios Peter. He's also Dios Pitar. He's also Dios, the thunder god in the Hindu religion. He's numerous gods, Teshub,
Mm-hmm.
Tyrannus. There are versions of Zeus scattered throughout Turkey and Asia Minor there.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have Jesus, as they would say in the Latin or even Greek, if you spell the name Jesus or Yezos in Greek,
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with Zeus, essentially. Okay, no one ever notices this. And then when you say it, it sounds silly. Well, of course, they're not trying to say Zeus there.
Mm-hmm.
They're scholars. They wouldn't do that sort of thing. Well, no, they would do exactly that sort of thing. And then Judas becomes Dios, you see, by a simple matter of transposition of letters. This is something that they always do when they create parallel names, or even when you create more complicated words from simpler words, you end up shifting what syllable a particular verbal root comes in on or something. So
Mm-hmm.
you have Zeus as Jesus, you have Judas as a Dios of Dios Pitar, and you have Peter as Pitar or Pidar, which Zeus, Jupiter, is also called. Now, the Greeks had taken the Romans took the Greek system into their system, the whole thing, by about 200 BC. So, by the time we're getting Christian myth, there is no clear separation between Greek and Roman Zeuses, or really any other Zeus,
Mm-hmm.
because he had a lot of precursors. So you've got Dios Peter, you've got Judas, who's actually representing the soil, and we see him return to that soil in Judah, which is Judea, which is where Jerusalem is, and our story is somewhat centralized.
All
Okay,
right. So.
so people all over the place are worshiping Zeuses. The Celts have their own Zeuses, and they're in Galatia. So let me do the Polyphemus myth really quick,
Mm-hmm.
because Polyphemus had a son called Galatos. And we know that Polyphemus was stabbed in the center of his eye. Well, similarly, Goliath in the Bible takes a rock from King David right in the what we might call the center of his forehead, or the center of his eyes, in between his eyes, and goes down. Okay, these are coming from the same mythos, most probably because Polyphemus myth exists as 200 versions. Sure, we've read about the Homeric Odysseus in the cave and all of this, but that's just one of 200 versions that are scattered around in different nations in the ancient world.
Mm-hmm.
So Goliath being his son Galatos makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And what he actually represents is the blinding of the hero is often blinded. St. Paul, speaking of Polyphemus,
Mhm.
is blinded in the Gospels. Other Orion is blinded as a god. It's a kind of a commonly known trope, but
Mhm.
strangely, it means a seeing, a coming into realization, which is spiritual, which is of a higher sort of revelatory
Mhm.
nature, or the appearance of the god. When you figure out who the hero is, or who the god is, often in the myth, when you can suddenly see who it is that you couldn't see before, that's this moment of epiphany, as in the epiphany of St. Paul. Because in his where he is blinded, that is where he sees. Oedipus is the same thing. Oedipus is a late version of a character that represents all of humanity. He's something like an archetypal uh, sacred man or divine man character,
Mhm.
in the sense that Adam is. And so he finally realizes his great errors and gets a revelation famously, and he puts his eyes out. St. Paul is similarly blinded. Polyphemus is blinded because Odysseus needs to get him to move the rock from in front of the cave. And that Petrus, the rock, is that rock. Okay,
Yeah.
Peter represents Janus. Now, the link between Zeus and Janus is somewhat tenuous. It's not really clear, but
Yeah.
they also figured that because Janus was the beginning of all things, he was also the beginning of Jupiter. Jupiter also began with Janus. And so what happens is Peter is given keys because he is a janitor like Janus, and janitor means caretaker. Okay, so these keys have a huge symbolic meaning. He gets two that are like heaven and hell, and but it could also be reduced to a single key. It just depends on the gatekeeper story they're telling. Most of the gods have a gatekeeper of one sort or other. Now,
Okay.
the mystery cults typically had a gatekeeper, even an armed person with a sword, whose job was to guard the entry of the sacred secret, you know, meetings and that sort of stuff. So
Mhm.
what I'm saying is, Peter, if you look what happens, he's at Banias, and Banias is a place where Pan's temple is. And at that place, Jesus, in one breath, calls Peter Satan because Peter is blocking him. Peter is telling him, don't go to Jerusalem. Don't get crucified. They're going to kill you. Something to this effect. And he's
Mhm.
like, but this is what I've come for. So he doesn't explain that, but we know what Jesus's mission is. He's going to go and he's going to accept his death. Okay, so Peter ends up opposing him here, but he says he'll build the church on Peter and that the gates of hell will not prevail against his rock that he builds this church on. Okay, Jupiter was replaced by a rock. When Kronos, his father, was swallowing his children,
Mhm.
Zeus Jupiter was not swallowed because his mother Rhea Silvia wrapped up a rock in a bundle and fed that to Cronus. Okay, so the myth goes. But this is an allegory for spitting out the months of the year. Each month is a moon, and the moon is a rock. Okay, so this is Petrus. And if the moon is opposing the will of God, well, then it's a stumbling block, or that's that sort of thing. But
Mhm.
here's what happens. That rock gets spit out and it falls at Delphi. And it's called the Omphalos stone, and it remains secret. And Delphi is considered the navel, which is a nice way of saying the womb of the Greek Empire, the spiritual womb of the place. And the dolphin becomes that womb image. As we know, Jonah is spit out of a fish. This is a birth image.
Gotcha.
So the Christians, they have this old fish story of what is probably Nina of Nineveh's as the fish swallowing the prophet Jonah, but she's bringing an Ionan or a Greek, one with a Greek name, to Nineveh, where that's one of the big cities of the ancient world, and so there's a lot of syncretism between religious myth that goes on in a place like that. Okay, now what you can do if you're interested and you're listening to this, you can Google the three Zephs, because in the Hellenistic religion called Hellenismos, the three Zephs are the three Zeuses. And this shows you how the one God is the three gods of the three realms of existence: the underworld, the earth, and the celestial realm. And that's what the Christian Trinity partly is identified by, the fact that they saw three realms of existence. And we hear in the Bible Psalms that Yahweh is in hell. Yahweh is in Sheol. Okay, he has to exist in all the realms. Wherever you go, he permeates the whole cosmos. So no one can flee from Yahweh's presence. You see what I'm saying? Because in a sense, the Romans already had their own monotheism in Orpheus cult. The Greeks had it as well.
Okay.
So they had combined gods.
So when we're talking about Jesus, Peter, and Judas, we're talking about heaven, the earth, and Hades?
Well, it could be seen that way. Actually, I'm kind of putting Peter at January and seeing him as the God that's born. He's the first, born in the first month of the year. It's the return of the sun. Okay, he comes through the gate, and Janus is the one that is the gate opener there. Okay, so, but he's a version of Jupiter, which is associated with January because his other name is Januarius. Okay, like the royal man of January or something like that, that would suggest.
Yeah. So, so we have mimesis with Zeus, which, I mean, we can kind of see that with the Jesus being God, the primary God. And how does Judas fit into it? Oh, do we lose you? All right, we might have lost Phil there. If you can hear me, I can't hear you. All right. Looks like we lost Phil. All right, here, I'll message him. All right, I think he might have lost his internet connection because I just messaged him. All right, might be a shorter interview here. We lost our guest. All right, any of the viewers want to come on? We can we can keep the live stream going. If any of our viewers that have wanted to come on previously, we can come on here. But yeah, it looks like we lost Phil because I messaged him on Facebook and there's no check mark. So he's probably not online. All right, maybe we'll give it a minute and then will that be a shorter interview for today? And yeah, just for fun, if anybody wants to come on while I'm vamping here, you can do that. All right. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. It's a short form interview for today. Sometimes they go quite long, so maybe this will be a little bit refreshing. All right. So yeah, feel free to subscribe and like it or dislike it. I wouldn't mind at all if you dislike this this interview here. All right. Thank you everybody for joining us. Have a fantastic day.